Over you guys.
Always wanted to do that.
I don't know what it means.
Hi everybody, welcome to AVA Online 2021, May 2021, a series of conversations about music, panels, Q&As, keynotes, and this chat, which is all about kind of DIY, artist-led release strategies. I suppose in many ways, what precipitated the idea of doing a session like this was this idea that, as everybody knows, it's an almost entirely frictionless way that any artist can put their music into the public domain. I could sit here on my phone, I could call up an app, make a tune, I could push it to SoundCloud, I could push it to Bandcamp, I could direct upload it to streaming services such as Spotify, or use an aggregator like TuneCore and go to all the DSPs. I could probably send to the Czech Republic and press up some vinyl. If it's that easy to release music and to put it into the public domain, then of course what has happened, and this feels more prevalent, I guess, in the last 12 to 18 months as people haven't had the experience of live music and those kind of focus points of going on, you know, shows and touring and festivals and whatnot, is just how much music is in the public domain. We all know about the statistics of how many thousand pieces of music are uploaded to SoundCloud or Spotify every day. And there is this ubiquitous now, and I suppose almost kind of infinite, long tail, which is just music being created and put into the public domain. If that is the case, there is also still the notion that extraordinary music will survive and will thrive. But I suppose the kind of question that emerging artists and producers who are making this music ask themselves all the time is, you know, so how do I actually take the music from my bedroom or from my studio and make it resonate in the public domain? Like, what does that success look like? What should it be? Should I press vinyl? Should I look at premieres and remixes? You know, should I just kind of do Bandcamp Fridays and nothing else? There are, you know, as many questions about DIY release strategies as there probably are pieces of music being uploaded right now onto the worldwide information interweb superhighway. So the challenge that we and the panel have set ourselves for your benefit is to come up with a bit of a roadmap, a bit of a blueprint, I guess, not a one-size-fits-all solution, but something about strategies that artists, that emerging artists can use to cut through this infinite white noise and make those releases, those pieces of art and creativity which are central to what it is to be a kind of artist and to want to be an artist and have that kind of innate thing about I want to articulate my creativity not through photography or through fine art or through words, but through music. You know, to make that stuff matter and make it count. Because as many people would always say, you know, good art deserves to be heard and deserves a voice. But finding that voice and finding the audience for that creativity feels sometimes more challenging than ever. So we have, it's a bit like the A-Team, we have the crack commando group who are gonna unpack this fascinating, interesting topic and maybe start to tease out some things and some actionable pieces of information that you, the artistic and creative community in electronic, but in wider genres of music as well, can then use to sort of leverage your own awesome creativity going forward. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to ask Emma, Dan, and Jessie to introduce themselves to you so that you get a little bit more of a sense of who they are, what the kind of role is that they have in this conversation, where they are between the kind of artists and the creatives and the rights and I suppose the kind of consumer or the end user. So Emma, I'm going to start with you. Thank you very much for coming down today. And
thank you.
Would you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and then just maybe a little bit about Ransom Note as well? Who are you and what is it that you do?
So I'm label manager at Ransom Note Records, which is the record label attached to the Ransom Note magazine, which is specialized in electronic music and underground cultures. And so yeah, I work directly with artists on a daily basis and represent them. I'm the middleman between them and the big distribution DSPs and all that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming down. Next to Emma, we have Dan. Dan, what brings you here, apart from the invitation?
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me down here to be on this panel with these experts. It's an honor. I'm part of a company called Tape. We're a management company, been going for about 10 years. We originally started as a record label and then realized that we were slowly getting more and more involved with the day-to-day activities of the artists that we were working with. So our main kind of role is to make a business out of these artists, to make sure that these artists can live and continue to create their art.
Yes.
So we build teams around the artists that can help support them. And we are there day to day supporting the artists and making sure that all the dots are connected, putting together the longer strategies. So we've got lots of experience of kind of doing DIY stuff as well, because we facilitate a lot of the releases for artists if they want to retain rights.
Yep.
But we've also got a lot of experience of working with labels as well. So we can kind of see how both releases can work and how they are different.
Cool. And finally, Jessie, what brings you here?
What brings me here? Good question. So yeah, I'm Jessie. I run an agency called Wicksteed Works, and this Wicksteed Works specialises in audience communication and e-commerce strategy.
Okay.
So I've been doing this for about 10 years now, working in fan engagement, e-commerce, helping artists to make the best decisions about getting those strategies right. Yeah, happy to talk more about it.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Mark Gordon. Been moderating this chat. Been lucky enough to work with AVA from day one, the first conference in Belfast, through events in Amsterdam, ADE, and even as far away as Mumbai in India, doing kind of chats not unlike this one, with interesting, cool people who work in music. So very happy to be here. So Jessie, so then before we even think about the release, I suppose the first thing we need to think about is, it's such a big question, artists putting in effective systems in place that will allow them to kind of start to cultivate a fan base before they do that big thing of kind of switching over to being like, and now I'm going to sell you stuff. So talk to that just for a second or two to begin with. How, what sort of, give me some easy wins that artists can do at that point.
Sure. So when I talk to an artist with this kind of question as the headline, the first thing we're thinking about is, what is the potential fans' first impression going to be when they land on your social profile? Okay. We're usually starting with social media because most artists are familiar with using that in their personal lives, so it seems like an easy step to start to publicise their musical output through the social channels as well. So right now, I guess Instagram tends to be the prevalent channel, so we start thinking, okay, what do we want people to experience when they get there? Let's figure out how they're going to get there as a secondary step. Okay. But there's a lot of work to be done around figuring out who the artist is. There's a famous talk by a guy called Simon Sinek that I reference quite a lot. Okay. The talk has a more complicated name, but he repeats the idea of starting with why a lot. Start with why. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Okay. So we talk a lot about figuring out what the artist's why is, and we do this by first thinking about their values, their personal values. Personal values are a great stepping stone into artistic values, and when we have an idea of what those artistic values are, we can start to think, what is it in this artist's personal world that they are gravitating towards that would express those values. Okay. So say for example, let's try and think of one on the spot. For me, one of my personal values is community. So it makes a lot of sense for me to be helping others to build their communities and to looking to join communities when I feel it's an appropriate fit for me. Okay. So I tend to do that quite a lot. So if it was an artist who also felt that community was a big deal for them, they might talk about communities that they were a member of on their social channels, if it makes sense, okay. And look to build their own community and do what they can to start to build that sense. So it's all about finding ways of bringing to life who the artist is and what they want to be in the world, what they want to change in the world, the ideas that they want to promote around the music. There's lots of channels out there for pushing their music, but when it comes to social media and fan engagement, we need to find out who this artist actually is. We want to know who they are as a person. Are we going to like them as a friend? Because when you think about artists that you like, their music, you also think we'd probably be mates if we hung out, right? Probably like to like...
I think that a lot. Yes.
Yeah, right, of course. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking for making a huge circle of friends that we haven't met yet, right?
Okay, we'll go down the virtual pub for the Zoom pint, or the real pub in real life. Okay, brilliant, thank you very much. So we have the starting point, Dan, of, it's a lot of kind of soul gazing. It's quite a kind of holistic way of the artist starting to think about the people around them, the people they want to kind of bring towards them. At the same time, in another lane, is the sort of creativity that they're involved with, the things that they're starting to do. Obviously, as a manager, you'll come towards an artist that has probably kind of cracked some of these questions that Jessie has just kind of talked about a little bit, and then your first thing will be, you're looking at all the different potential revenue streams, let's say, for someone to come on board, tape for management, and within the context of all those, releasing will be one of them. I suppose my first question to you is, as a manager, how important is the releasing of physical and streamable music next to live, next to publishing, next to all the other kind of key revenue streams? Because I suppose I'm asking this because at the end of the day, historically it's the most compelling part of what an artist is about, is the actual it's the music they make.
Yeah, I mean it totally depends on the artist.
Right.
Each artist, I think Jessie's answer to your previous question was just spot on, so well answered. And each artist has their own personality, they've got their own audience which they've got to find a way of engaging with that's authentic. And the same comes to making money. So for instance, some of the artists that I work with are also models, but models based on their personality as an artist rather than a model in their own right.
Okay.
Whereas others are also writers and producers for other artists, and they can make money from producing an album or writing for another artist and stuff like that. It's all about finding what their niche is, what they are interested in, that wouldn't also overtake their own creativity for their own path. Okay. Which is a really difficult balance to manage, because often when you're kind of working with an artist and you're looking at royalties from a publisher or a record label, right, or even a distributor sometimes, yes, that can take a while to come in. So when someone comes along and says, I'll give you 1,500 quid for a remix, you're like, okay, I could take that now, it's cash in my pocket. But do you have enough time? Is that going to get in the way of release strategy? Is it going to take it away from the focus of your own music? You've got to kind of think of the bigger picture and what's true to the artist that you're working with. Yeah, and that's really just specific on remixes. I think that's really interesting as well, that idea that it's sort of it's somewhat kind of cash in hand. It's it's actually quite similar in a way to kind of doing a show and whatnot. It's like, here's a thing, book me, here's the master, and that must be, I can see how that could be quite a compelling thing. Whereas if the artist is like, well, actually I'm ready to do my next release, and you're like, whoa, we have these remixes, we need to kind of like service this part of your career. That must be quite challenging sometimes for the artist who wants the core thing about them to be their own music and their own creativity, to have that kind of like, subsumed slightly if they just happen to be kind of compelling around things like remixing. Same with featuring as well, featuring on other people's tracks as well. Right. There's an element of that, of like, does that take it away from what I'm trying to do? Will I be able to get a bigger audience by joining in with someone else's audience? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned live in both your questions there, and that's like, as we're talking to a lot of emerging artists, some might have not played live or some may be starting out. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult area to come through. We've always, in our management company, and this is very different for everyone, because I think MMF released a report that 70% of managers' income comes from live. Wow. Overall. For us, it's completely different. We see like live as a cherry on top. So because when you take into consideration the artists that we work with, they're often solo artists who have session musicians or have big bands playing with them. The amount that costs of going to rehearsal or traveling on transport and all of that stuff, it costs so much money to start off, and when you get support tours and stuff like that, you don't get paid that well. So we've always seen live as, in terms of money making, as a cherry on top, like a secondary thing, but it's incredibly important when promoting music. Absolutely, and probably a more robust business model, especially over the last 12 to 18 months. Yeah. Cool, thank you. So then, Emma, it'd be interesting to talk about then, Ransom now is approaching an artist. This will be an artist that will have had various traction, will have been kind of, perhaps noted in the blog, will be in a sort of slightly evolved way. You could be the first actual team member outside the artist to approach the artist. So they might not have a manager, they might not have an agent, they might not have PR or marketing and whatnot. I'm interested, just to start off with, as a label, what are the kind of, are you taking a kind of metrics-based focus on the artists that you're looking at? Are you absolutely going with your gut in terms of, what we all want to believe is that it's just freaking awesome music and it needs to be released. It's amazing. How does the label kind of balance, when looking at
potentially releasing music by artists, those two kind of slightly divergent, and often, they can converge, but sometimes it's like two sine waves that are completely different, and they only kind of hit every now and again. Are you creative focused? Are you business focused? Talk to that for a second.
Well, this label is definitely gut focused, I would say.
Okay.
Gut driven, and it's a lot of passionate work, and it really comes down to what the music makers feel, I would say, rather than the business. So obviously we're going to look at metrics a little bit, but I would not say that it influences the decision on signing an artist or not.
Okay, so you're not going to be like, 10 Spotify streams a year.
Well, most of the artists that we release or we sign out have sometimes never released anything. So it's really about breaking them through. And so yeah, that's definitely.
Okay, this is
but
good
that's
to
particular
hear.
to this label, which is really underground focused, I would say.
Of course. So it feels like you're saying the decision making is kind of highly creative, and
yes,
whilst you might look at the social stats and you might look at Instagram, you might look at kind of like are they kind of in some way just even like active at all?
Yeah, obviously you want the artist to be engaged and to have built their audience, and most of them don't have a team around them, like they don't have a management, they obviously don't have PR or radio pluggers and stuff, so we are trying to build this team around them.
And just following on from what Dan said as well, I mean, I think it's really interesting that as a management company, Dan, and the company would take the attitude that live is the cherry on top of the cake, and the cake is all the other revenue streams and potential for revenue streams. Ransom Note would sign an act who wouldn't tour or wouldn't DJ. You would be content to sign someone who was just a producer.
Yeah, I think that's possible, yeah. Well, obviously as a label, we don't have a business with the live side of the things. It obviously helps promoting the music.
I'm thinking in terms of promoting the music, yeah.
Yeah, it obviously helps, but yeah, I think we could totally do that. It's already happened.
Okay, this is good, especially good in these strange times as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, Jessie, so let's imagine then that the artist has come out of the studio, be it the virtual studio, the home studio, or maybe even a studio that they went and did some recordings in. Imagine that. And they have the finished and mastered track. Let's say it's a track that's going to be released. From that day of the track being finished, give me the starting sense of a timeline towards the kind of curtain being pulled back in terms of the track coming into the public domain in some manner, shape or form.
Yeah.
Are we talking weeks? Are we talking 12 weeks? Are we talking, what are we, I mean, it's probably different for every artist, I appreciate, but give me some generalities about that.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, I'd like to just head off that question by just asking everyone, what is the point of a pre-save? I do not understand what the value of it. I might be controversial here, and I will answer your question, but I just want to ask, because I understand that if an artist is able to persuade a bunch of their fans to pre-save a single, that's great for them, that's great for the artist. There's some signals been sent through the wires to Spotify, some algorithms are going to be clicking over, and that's good. They may be rewarded by featuring and algorithms rewarding them, etc.
Okay.
But as a fan who clicks a pre-save button, I don't see any benefit whatsoever. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong.
Well, it just goes into your likes
in my library from an artist that I had pre-saved. I couldn't find it, and I don't get a notification. So I actually don't. Am I doing it wrong? What do you think? I know there must be a point to it.
There's a couple of things, and
This is interesting.
This is not just taking an aim at Spotify at all, but there's a couple of things like what you're saying, like for instance with playlists. Yep. What's the point in following a playlist when you don't get told when it's been updated?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay. So it relies upon the end user going back in and remembering.
We accidentally shut down our notifications without knowing.
No,
maybe there's somewhere I could change and be like, yes, tell me the things that I want to know.
I haven't had the experience of doing a pre-save and it not turning up, so I don't know.
Where does it turn up?
In your liked songs.
Where do I find those?
Oh, well, I mean, they've just changed everything around, haven't
Yeah.
they?
It's not like I'm in the habit of going, oh, anything new in here.
I can't remember if it's in your library or in your search function.
I guess what I'm getting at with this digging at pre-saves is I do realise that there's a value because it's good for the artist because it sends signals to Spotify that they could get preferential treatment in the future through various ways that I don't pretend to completely understand.
Okay.
But I don't see what's in it for the fan. However, I have seen some great campaigns lately where I've seen artists kind of going, okay, I'm asking my fan to do a thing for me that they don't really necessarily understand. So I'm going to sweeten it for them, and they've actually been doing some incentives, giveaways. So I talked to an artist yesterday who said, yeah, I did a pre-save recently and I offered, I can't remember what it was exactly, like a t-shirt or something as an incentive, a giveaway of a t-shirt. So I said, well, how did you run that? How did you know when people had done the pre-save? And she said, well, I got them to screenshot the pre-save and send me the thing. And I was like, wow. Well, did anybody enter? Because if they did, you've got some good fans.
Way of doing it.
Yeah, right? That's some good fans. But I do know there are services which make it a little easier. There's a service called OpenStage. Don't know if you've come across it. No. They have a system that's plugged into Spotify's API. So they're actually really clever. They tie up lots of data ends and put them in one place. So if if an artist says, pre-save my track, go to this link, you go to a link and there's actually a data capture form. So you enter your email address. Right. Bing. Perfect. I'm all about the email address. Yeah. And then on the next page it says pre-save and follow the artist. So it's putting all of this into the system, and OpenStage itself sends that off to Spotify and gets it happening that way. So in that way, artists who are using that tool will be able to track exactly who has done the pre-save and follow up with them because they have their email address, and potentially they go on to connect their social as well.
Yeah, so in many ways, I suppose what you're starting to open up is a conversation which is to do with tools that exist which you can plug into as part of a release strategy or towards a release strategy that give you just a much deeper engagement with your fans. Yeah. That will allow you to take comfort in the fact that as you're leading up to kind of milestones, the milestone could be a premiere or something, or it could be a remake. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. You're just the engagement is deeper, right? It's just making the tools work for you in a smarter way, for sure. Because there's points where we have a little bit of leverage to ask a fan to do something for us as an artist, and we really want to make that thing give us the best possible return, and not just be like a like or a stream, because a stream is great. But it's not the same as having someone follow you on social media and being able to follow up with them, or better yet, getting them to give you their email address. Well, I just want to, just because you mentioned it and seem to place a lot of value in the email address, just tell me a little bit more about the value of the email address as opposed to everything else that you've just described. Yeah, sure. So I guess if we think of the value of a fan engagement or a fan interaction with an artist's music or with an artist's content, if we think about what's the value of a fan streaming a track. Yes. There's a value, a minuscule, incremental value in terms of money, but we don't sneeze at it, it's money. That's good. But if you appear on a playlist with that track and the fan happens upon it, the chance of them clicking through and following your profile, I guess I'm thinking about Spotify in this case, because I don't know how the other ones work, there's a chance. But it's just as easy for the fan to move on in the playlist and think, oh, that track was pleasant, moving on, and never really go there again. So as an artist, I'm not able to follow up with that fan. I don't get to see who it was. I don't get to target them with some kind of communications. Okay. So that's not so great in the longer term. If it's Instagram, and if I've managed to get somebody to follow me on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or Snapchat, whatever we're talking about these days, there's a slightly higher value to me in that, because I have that person in a group and that I can target them with content, and that I can post content, and they are in a group of people who have opted in to see it. Whether they see it or not depends on the algorithms of the platform. Sure. So we still have quite a lot of loss of control in that conversation. Variables, and we don't really understand the variables either. Okay. We can also put some money toward it, and we've got a higher chance of getting our content in front of them. Okay. So it's a slightly higher value. Then again, if you've managed to get someone to join a mailing list, and I do understand this is a much bigger ask, but there are ways of making it more palatable and making it clear that there's a benefit to them doing so. If they do that, then we have access to their inbox. Hopefully it's an inbox that they occasionally look at. That's not always the case, I realise. But I think time and again we've seen that there is a much higher return on investment through the email channel, because you're able to get into someone's inbox. It's going to stay in there. Maybe it'll disappear down into the tens of thousands of emails that can exist in inboxes, I realise. But there's a much higher chance of people actually being more engaged, and as an artist, being able to track what it is that they've done, if they've opened the email, if they've clicked through and done a thing that you've asked them to do, if they've actually gone and bought something, God forbid. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the more we can do that kind of migration from those softer, more variable filled, the better. Exactly, it's a migration, and it's not necessarily a total migration, it's more an additional channel for the fans who want to go deeper. So that's why I think it's really important to have this holistic spread of communication channels. You've got your
streaming channels, you've got your social media channels, and then you've got your own channels, and it's just really smart to be setting up those own channels from the start. Own channel, I call email an owned channel because we own direct access to the fan.
Owned channel. Okay, I like that phrase. Thank you. So, Dan, we've got this release. We're cognizant of this different, we have the kind of range of opportunity that's been discussed, and we're starting to look at a strategy towards an end date, where, as I said, in some way we digitally pull back the curtain on the release. Talk for a second about the idea that for artists who are maybe just a little bit more evolved than super emerging, they might have this tiny budget, and they might be looking at, indie PR, or marketing, or Facebook ads, or engaging with somebody, another team member. It could obviously be a label. It would be ideal if it was a label, but often if they are self-releasing, they just don't have that opportunity. Where should I put my 1,500 quid? Should I press?
Not bad budget.
Should I? Yeah, apart from Jessie. Yeah. Because it's a hard thing to call, right?
It is.
And often for emerging artists, this is money hard earned in other types of work.
Absolutely.
That they want the spend to go as far as possible. So, talk to that for a second. Should I be doing lots of photos? Should I be doing videos? Should I press vinyl?
I think, as we keep on touching upon, it's different for every artist depending on how they want to get their message across and what they want in return. Because, for instance, if you're doing an ad campaign, it might not necessarily be pointing people towards the music that you've just released. Okay. It might be pointing people towards some merchandise that you've got out at the same time as the release, and getting people's eyes on your brand, your profile, and everything like that, so that you can get some of the money back that you're spending at the same time as, it happens to be around the same time we're releasing this.
So then, that's fascinating. So then the track, historically the core thing with value, becomes almost a construct to take the audience to another place.
It's like a lost leader sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was Lethal Bizzle who admitted that he didn't make much money from his music. It was all about the merchandise. Right. And his music was released to sell merchandise. And I think a lot of people have kind of taken that on. But I'm not saying it's about that. It is about the music first and foremost.
Oh yeah, no, but that's really interesting.
But you can run campaigns pointing towards different things rather than just the music, because there's so many different ways that people consume music. So Linktree, for instance, is a good one to send people to. And
what, for those who don't know, what is Linktree?
Linktree is a simple link that you can embed in websites on social media, and it has basically a tree of different websites that you can click onto, whether that's different streaming platforms, your own website, or sign up to a mailing list, or embed a YouTube video or something like that. So it's a great tool to use to allow the audience to choose their own avenue of where they go.
So back to the question. Just before we move on to the label perspective, I suppose it's from the manager perspective, where you're looking at that kind of 20% that the manager takes. So whenever you're doing that spend, it's like, if we're going to get photos done, we really need to justify it. We need to kind of know why we're doing it, because we want to release them in this way towards these PR opportunities. Or if we're going to do a short video, we're doing it very specifically because we've seen it work for this, this, and this, which are in a similar lane to our music. So I suppose what I'm saying is it the rationale for the kind of spend, because oftentimes the music's free to make, right?
Sometimes
at home. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes
I think
where do you start to? What is there an asset list that an artist should start to think about as they move towards a release?
I mean, you have to have artwork, and you have to have a press release. First and foremost, you have to have some kind of depth and story to what's happening. Mm-hmm. I would very much advise you to have some photos, but there's no reason why you can't do that on your own. Yep. Like, it doesn't have to be. It just has to be you expressing yourself as an artist, I think. Okay. Obviously, the better quality, the better. But like, some people might appreciate the DIY kind of aspect of it as well.
Okay, so play that to your advantage, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's about expressing yourself and kind of bringing that message across of what the story that you're trying to say. In terms of in terms of other assets, like a lot of the artists that I work with, we completely stopped making videos.
So why is that?
Because it's really hard to focus this attention on promoting all these different avenues. Video, like the song on streaming platforms, the song for download, the song for like the tour date, the merchandise. It's like people are getting thrown at them so many things. And I think
so. It's like a choice paralysis almost. It's like
For
there are too many ways that I've been given the opportunity to consume this piece of music, and I just want this or this.
I mean, people are paying a lot of money each month to have their service to where they listen to their music. So, like, they might go to that platform to listen to it and might not go to YouTube. But at the same time, a lot of people discover new music on YouTube. But whether that's a video or kind of an art board is debatable. The reason we've stopped doing it is because we've noticed that our audience don't engage with the videos.
Okay.
But then saying that there's key releases where we will have a video for.
Okay.
But back like a few years ago, we were doing releases. Every release had its own video. So it's, and I think that back to your original question, this is the issue. It is about trial and error.
Okay.
You will have to try a few things out. Is my audience reading blogs? Will they come to listen to my music because they've read about me on this blog? Or should I focus my attention on radio? Will they listen to a radio show and have someone come? Or, you know, all these kind of things. Should I send my music to a DJ who's going to play it and that will be a tastemaker? It's about trial and error. Unfortunately, it's not going to be.
It's not unfortunate though. It can be fun.
Yeah, trial and error.
Experimentation.
Try it. Okay. You never know. You might like it.
But that, I mean, like, so then this is really interesting, Emma. So then, from the label's perspective, you know, gosh, sometimes it must be hard to know just where to put the greatest part of your energy into. I mean, I'm interested, for example, that when I do a search for Ransom now, the first thing that came up to me was Bandcamp. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I must ask Emma about, within all the range of opportunities for, you know, the releases that Ransom now do to be consumed and sometimes acquired, how important is Bandcamp to you?
Well, it's definitely very important. I think it's grown in importance exponentially over the last few years, and especially this year with all the Bandcamp Fridays, it's been major for every independent label and independent artist as well. It's, I would say it's at the core of smaller
and that
ventures
feels like such a change, as you say, in terms of
it's fairly recent.
Is it as simple as, you know, what the Bandcamp Fridays as you've mentioned? Maybe you could explain that just for those who don't know what Bandcamp Friday is.
Yeah, so Bandcamp Fridays are a campaign that Bandcamp started with the first lockdown of COVID, I think, to help the artists by waiving their revenues, their revenue fees on all the purchase on that Friday, the first Friday of every month. And it's been an amazing campaign. I think it worked really well for the platform and the artist as well. I've had lots of success throughout the label by just putting forward this day and say it's Bandcamp Friday, it's the day you should support.
I think what's really smart about Bandcamp Friday is that because of the revenue waiving, every artist who uses Bandcamp and every label is promoting Bandcamp, and that wasn't happening before.
That's why it's been such a great idea.
Yes, that is true. On my timeline, when there is a Bandcamp Friday, and it's not only the labels and the artists, it's just friends and music going like, all right, put your hand in your pocket, it's time to go to the shop.
Can I ask a question to you both? Because I'm wondering, like, Bandcamp has a lot of super fans and fans who really want to support the artists. That's why they're going to Bandcamp, to kind of make sure the money goes to them. Like, do you think that it's a similar audience to the people who would sign up to mailing list?
I think it's the same audience a lot of the time.
It's the same. When you buy something on Bandcamp, you have the option of giving you an email address as well. So it's definitely. Yeah,
it's funny. Some of the artists I've been speaking to lately who are relatively new to their careers. They will have been using Bandcamp for a little while, and sometimes they don't even realise that they have a ready-made mailing list already. So I'm like, well, this is great. Look, you can see the supporter photos under that album. You've clearly got a few people there.
Yes, I always find that extraordinary when I see just this drop-down list of people who have engaged.
But that's also one of the great things about the social element of Bandcamp, because as a supporter, I mean, I'm just such a sucker for marketing. I want to be in that grid. I want to be. I want to know my photo is there.
MySpace top 8 friends.
Yes, it's like there's Tom and me.
And you can see the reviews of other customers as well. It's much more of an engaged audience, I think, than a normal
platform. This is very interesting. So Bandcamp clearly has had a great, it sounds like a terrible thing to say, a great pandemic in terms of what they've done. And the fact, I know, how can there be such a thing as a great pandemic when it's been so absolutely devastating for the totality of the music industry. So then I want to fly through another couple of things as well, just because I think you're the label, so everything for you is about the value of the master recording. So I'm interested when you're doing releases, what else you're thinking about. So give me some instinctive responses. Physical. Do you do, to what extent do you look at vinyl? To what extent do you do like, very small cassette runs?
Yes, we do that a lot. Yeah. Like cassette runs have become as well, I think, quite popular because
and that's becoming a compelling revenue stream?
I wouldn't say it's compelling. It's more like a merch item, and it's part of the identity. But I wouldn't say it's one of the major sources of revenue. Vinyl is definitely bringing more in, important? But it's harder and it's more expensive to press. So.
And also the lead-in times at the moment for vinyl are like
crazy.
6 months, 8 months, 10 months?
Yes, it's really difficult. So you have to have like a really tight campaign for that and plan really well in advance.
Okay. Another one, SoundCloud.
I think SoundCloud it used to be really, really important, and I think the value has gone down a little bit. I think they've lost a bit the social aspect that they used to have, and maybe they've been replaced by Bandcamp in that respect.
Yes.
I'm sure some artists are doing really well still on it, but I feel less of a community.
Yes, because historically you would jump onto SoundCloud and you would see, and the timeline and the writing, and it felt quite kind of like dynamic and active. But
from my perspective, I think this is shifted to Bandcamp, I would say.
That's very interesting. All roads lead to Bandcamp. Well, I think we should, we're talking about releases, and, it's been mentioned a couple of times, just anecdotally, the idea of the DSPs, the streamers, Spotify, Apple Music. I mean, where do we even begin about this? I suppose the first question would be, and this is a question to all of you, within the context of a release, how much of the farm are you betting on a good streaming release? Jessie?
I think, it's a good question. I mean, every artist, I think, wants to get picked up by an editorial playlist because they get a spike in streams, and that's amazing. And certainly, why wouldn't you want that? But I think I would always caution that we need to have a solid strategy for fan engagement around that. So you're not just relying on the potential. And even if there is a pickup and a spike in plays, we still need to have a story in place for the small percentage who do trickle through and find their way back to the artist's social platforms or website. Okay. So there's something there for them to kind of get their teeth into.
That's interesting. Dan, it sounds it's almost a bit like a sync placement. You need to be set up so that if the moment happens, and it'll always be very unlikely, that traffic that then comes off that placement, that you're ready to kind of like harvest that. Just, a thought or two from you about that whole thing to do with kind of getting a nice couple of streaming mentions and whatnot.
I mean, the thing is a lot of people say that streaming doesn't pay, but if you have tracks that are getting tens of millions, it does pay. Like, you can support yourself, you can pay for your PR teams, you can pay for like the next campaign. It does work like that. But I think Jessie is right. You have to be aware that there's other revenue streams and there's other ways that audiences can engage with your music that might be more relevant to you. And I think we're going to see more and more artists focusing on a small key target of audience rather than like everything. And I think Spotify especially is very clever, putting numbers next to your plays numbers next to your track, because everyone's obsessed with it. It's just like an Instagram post, how many likes you have. It's hard to get away from that, but it's not the be all and end all. You can't put a whole strategy around getting a playlist. It is exactly what you said. It's like, I want to get a sync for this. Like, you can't base your career or strategy around that.
It's a pointless thing to almost say.
Yeah. It's you're going to be disappointed.
You're going to be disappointed. Emma, what about for Ransom now? How much, when you're looking at all these different opportunities for visibility, and obviously you talked about Bandcamp, and it's great, the monetization end of Bandcamp to me is always about one of the most attractive things. But clearly, there's the blog premieres, there's streaming, there's playlisting, there's the hottest record in the whatever universe right now. How much do you care about streaming? Everybody cares about streaming. It's the wrong way of putting it. Is it a compelling revenue stream? What value do you see in strong playlisting? Does, as Jessie and Dan both said, can you successfully, that word again, migrate people from a hot playlist onto something that might resonate deeper?
Well, for record labels, I think streaming revenue is definitely compelling, and it's probably the majority of the revenue streams of a label nowadays. You also have a bit of physical, but if you'll succeed in the playlist game, I would say, well, it's really good. But like you said, you can't really rely totally on that because it's such a hard thing to get. But it's definitely part of each of the release strategy that we put out. It will be a core element, and we're going to try and put together lots of things to pitch to these releases. And once you're in that magic spot, then that's great. But you're going to see lots of money coming in. But like Jessie was saying, it's difficult to convert fans from that. So you're going to have this good place in that playlist, but you're not going to see lots of people tagging along to your profile and actually becoming loyal to you as an artist so much. So it's more of a monetary value, I would say.
And a quick question, just a follow-up question, starting with you on that front. Are you all, for those artists that you're working with or advising, or artists who are self-releasing as opposed to artists that you manage that are signed, are you direct uploading to streaming services? Are you going through an aggregator such as TuneCore? Is there an advantage to one as opposed to the other? Obviously, you can see the advantage to using an aggregator is I just upload my MP3s and whatnot, press a button, and tomorrow it's on YouTube and on Apple Music and Amazon and whatnot as well. Is there an advantage to direct uploading or not? Do we know?
As in direct?
Well, now that with Spotify you can, for example, direct upload content without using an aggregator.
I don't think you can.
I think they
talked about it.
Oh, they stopped that?
Yeah.
I think they were trialing.
They did.
Okay, so they stopped that.
No, I don't think you can.
So why did
Well, there was already 40,000 tracks a day, right? So it was like, why let that be twice that?
So this would actually have opened a Pandora's box / floodgate. Possibly. And there would have been,
I imagine there was more to it.
But there is an interesting question in there about who is best placed to if you are self-releasing, which distributor can provide the best service. And there's lots of different ways of a distributor that you pay up front depending on how many tracks you're going to release that year, or a distributor that's going to take anywhere between maybe 10 if you're lucky to 20% or 25% if they provide marketing and stuff like that on top. I used to work at a distributor, and honestly, they all provide a very, very similar service.
Okay, so
some of them you need to check out because some of them won't deliver to services that you want to be in, or maybe territories that you want to be in. Majority do now, but ones that are starting out sometimes don't deliver to all services. But I think it is key, as with everything that artists do, is finding somewhere that has a team member that really enjoys the music that you release and will support you. But that's not always possible with distributors because it can just be all digital, no kind of actual human interaction at all.
Yes,
but I believe that you should have that human interaction because you can get some support, and whether that's even things like, oh, your metadata is wrong, or you spelt that wrong, or that, just little things like that, or it's I'm going into a streaming service next week, I'll make sure to mention you, or something like that. It's just little things like that.
Okay, to cultivate a relationship with a distributor is an advantageous thing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We're running out of time. We are almost out of time. We're in fact nearly over time. So I want to ask a final question to each of you, and it's a really simple question. What does success look like? At the end, you have all been involved in the release of so many different types of music from so many artists, and I want to know what feels like success when you get to the end of a campaign and you're like, okay, that worked, that was really good. Jessie?
I think it's really important to set some objectives at the start of a campaign so that you know whether you've succeeded or not. You might think, well, I made some money and I sold some records, but I'm not really sure how many I expected to sell, so did I do well? So I think it's really important to set goals at the start so that you then can say, I did it or I didn't. And then you also can look back on it and say, did I hit those targets last time? I could do a similar process. What worked, what didn't?
Yeah, and I suppose if you don't build that stuff in, as you say, at the start, then you won't have that sense of kind of distance traveled at the end of the release cycle. Yeah, Dan, same question to you. Obviously, we just talked a second ago about, you know, how easy it is just to look at a big number on Spotify and go, well, success looks like that. But I mean, that can't be the case. What you know, when you've reached the end of the most successful campaigns that Tape have run as a management company around releases, what has success looked like for the management company and for the artist?
It's definitely being seen and having presence on lots of different places, whether that's radio, press, streaming platforms, audience growth, or all these kind of things, and just basically the artist elevating to the next level, just growing a little bit each time
Across lots of different lanes.
Yeah, really. It like, if I had a track that had like huge success but only on Spotify, I wouldn't see that as a success. We would want to be across the board. That's what we kind of see as success.
And I suppose that's because that's what we still will think that success looks like, because otherwise it looks like something of a spike or an anomaly.
Yeah.
So there isn't a kind of foundation beneath it.
We want to have other opportunities from that release, basically.
Yes.
New opportunities, yeah.
Final word with you, Emma. Obviously, you've been at Ransom now, I think now as label manager for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So you probably, you know, goodness knows how many releases you've been involved with over that time. I imagine a lot.
Yeah.
What does success look like for you? What are those cycles of releasing tracks or albums? You know, what does success look like for Ransom now?
Well, I would definitely agree with you, Dan, in saying that you want to be across everything, if possible. You don't want to just be good on Spotify and just have one playlist, because that's not going to translate. So if you have radio plays and if you worked your fan base and if you increased it, that's definitely going to feed into having more streams, selling more records on Bandcamp. Press is also a good sign of success in record labels. Usually you want to have features and reviews and all this sort of stuff, and yes, playlists and record sales on Bandcamp. That would be a good sign.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, listen, thank you all very much. I mean, the takeout that I have is that if I was an independent DIY artist, I suppose what I would want to do would be have the energy of all of you in a single person and kind of give myself the greatest opportunity by taking on as much of this as possible. I suppose it is that thing whereby, you know, historically artists feel like, well, if I've done the awesome raw creativity, then I should just be able to kind of toss it into the ether of the public domain and have it immediately validated at the highest levels. You know, the slightly less prosaic, but much more actionable reality is there are so many different things that I can do that will allow me and the music I make to have the opportunity to cut through. And I always think, as an artist, that's the most important thing. It's not just about the creativity and the music you make, it's that when you put it into the public domain, you feel like you've given it a chance by doing the right things with it, so that it can then be judged on a playing field that feels a lot more level and a lot less just like, you know, like a primordial swamp of endless ubiquity. So thank you all very, very much. It was absolutely fascinating, and I hope that everybody has learned a lot. And yeah, cheers for now. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.